Yeah, hi everybody. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Ben Hofferber. I'm a solution architect at Rangle.io, and we're going to talk about and work through an example of some tooling and technologies and practices that help us enable teams to be able to be more impactful and more capable. So first, I'll get started a little bit with some background. So I work at Rangle.io. We're a digital consultancy focused on partnering with companies and we digitally transform their practices and try and improve their customer experience. At Rangle, we really have this kind of creed of doing the right thing the right way and then improving on it, building on it. So I've been at Rangle for about 4 years. Rangle is a Canadian company, so I actually moved to Canada to join. And I actually originally lived in Idaho, which if you don't know where Idaho is on a map, that's okay. I've met a lot of people that don't. So here it is. And believe it or not, the data actually backs me up here. So as of 2016, here's sort of my general presence in professionally throughout the world. So knowing that there was like a lot more to explore and you kind of wanted to get out and see a lot of things, I actually came to Rangle, and as of today, I've been to a lot of different parts of the world. This is something that won't happen at like a lot of companies, and so I was really happy to be able to travel like this and get a pretty unique perspective. And one of the kind of most obvious things is that you really learn about a lot of different cultures. You get to learn about like different clients, different problems, assumptions that are kind of baked into kind of where people are and how they live. And then, but really, like there's kind of one constant or one constant thing that teams are really asked for everywhere. Teams are asked to deliver faster with higher quality, and then change quickly when the business learns something new about their company, their customers, and then they need to take and kind of capture an important opportunity. And then when we have teams and they're in this kind of situation, really there's a lot of questions. Like when they start kind of hitting the ground running and trying to keep up with the market, it's like, well, it feels like we're stuck. It feels like, it's really hard to change our process. It's really hard to change sort of what we're doing. Do we need better requirements? Why do we build this the wrong way? Is there something better that we could be building? And a lot of times it feels like you can't control the user experience layer without rebuilding everything from the ground up and just kind of restarting from the get-go. And as we've looked at these problems, this is why we think companies need to digitally transform. And really what that looks like is teams need a set of tools and practices that empower them to be able to meet these needs. We need cross-functional teams that understand problems from a lot of different perspectives. We're working against unknown problems. Not every company has built the software that they're building today before. So we can't really follow best practices. We're building emergent software. We need design and quality baked in because, as we sort of discover these unknowns, we need to really loop that all back in into kind of all of our different teams and different practices. We need to deliver working software every iteration so that we're testing our assumptions against the market and against our customers. And then we need to have open communication across all these different kind of groups of people, different silos, breaking down silos. And the ultimate goal is that we can continuously learn and improve as an organization. And so that's really what impact sort of means. Like why change software? Why change what you're building? Why change how you're building it? And we've done this with a couple of different clients. Uniqlo is one of our clients that we've worked with recently. We helped them deliver their first responsive component library made up of 173 components that covered nearly all of their use cases across their different platforms. And it resulted in an 80% faster feature build compared to, teams building these features that are specific to, or building components that are specific to their features and not thinking about it holistically or even being able to see the holistic picture. When we worked with JetBlue as another one, we worked on a design system and a component library for them, helping them improve their mobile performance by about 97%. And so that leads into kind of like why this talk, why today, what we're going to be talking about. And that's Angular NX as an amazing platform for us to get a jump started with. Storybook as an amazing tool for collaboration and communication. And then GraphQL and Apollo for us to really be able to build a discoverable interface for our data and how we build software. So if you've just joined or if you've joined a little late, this is the code repo we're going to be building out of. It's ng Apollo story under Rangle. That's the name of the repo. If you've had a problem downloading it, if you have a problem with the prerequisites, and there's anything that you're having problems with, I'd like to, if you can hop in the chat and maybe some other people can help you, that'd be great. But if you just want to follow along with just the code, that's another option as well. You can go to vscode.dev, and if I get over to my browser, you'll basically get the same sort of like VS Code environment that you would normally have on a local environment. You just can't use your terminal, can't use some of those other things, but at least you'll be able to see the code and kind of follow along that way. Once we've got this downloaded, we need to do a yarn install to get things going. So I think I've already done this, but let me just run it again. Oop. And this may take a little while for us to actually like build that completely. I've already got everything downloaded, so it may be taking everybody else a little bit longer. While we're going through this, I'll just kind of give a brief overview of sort of how these things are structured. We'll be diving in more to kind of some of the deeper pieces as we go. But the goal is for us to kind of get a holistic understanding of like, what are all these tools? How do they all work together in a unique workflow? So when we spin up an NX project, it's a monorepo. So we've got a series of applications, a series of libraries, and then when we have our distributables, they'll actually be underneath a specific application. So we can have multiple distributions. The configuration for NX is in this kind of NX JSON file here. I won't be going too in depth on NX, but I just wanted to kind of show you where things are. Angular JSON is really like kind of where NX gets a lot of its power from. So it's just riding on top of Angular CLI for a lot of the kind of details that it uses. So a lot of these different commands that we're going to be running, you can sort of see here where these commands are. So we've got a Apollo story, which would be our app, and then we're running serve. And so we're going to be definitely looking at this file quite a bit. In our apps folder, we've got our Angular app that we're going to be using. We've got a local Storybook version. There's a global Storybook configuration at the top level. And then inside of the E2E folder, this is actually a Cypress end-to-end testing framework. We're not going to be diving into that, but it is good to know that it's there. And it's a really cool tool if you want to dive in and think about running full end-to-end tests along with the code that you're writing. Then we've got Apollo Story Data. This is our folder that we're building as kind of a interface layer against our API. It's going to be all mostly generated code, but we'll be showing how we generate that code, how we generate the mock files, how we generate some of the library files that we'll be using for the Apollo Story code. And then finally, we've got our AWS Lambda, or AWS Cloud Formation CDK application. So this is actually the full backend. If you want to distribute your own or run your own, feel free to do so. I'm not going to be diving into CDK really that much. It's just nice to be able to spin up a GraphQL backend that's real for us to play with. So if you want to dive in a little bit more on that, you can. So that gives us the application that's running. I'm going to go ahead and run yarn start. And I'm just going to click in on this browser so it doesn't kick me out of my presentation. Okay. Thanks a lot, Michael, for posting all those links. All right, so we are live. Pop this open. Ooh, I don't know where that, okay, it ended up over here. So here is the application running. It may, actually, I guess I can just zoom in a little bit. Oh no, I can't. Okay. It's I just have this kind of stretching across the board. So apologies, it doesn't have like a a max width, so it'll just kind of keep growing as you zoom in. But here's sort of what we're going to be working on. It's a crypto tracker. So we've got a lot of different crypto price data that we're getting from our API. We've got a drop down here that gives us different values, which will load in as we change the value here. And then our GraphQL API is the one that's going to be serving this up and giving us all this data. And so, yeah, let me know, I guess, the show. If anybody's having any sort of problems, let us know in the chat, and then we can try and debug. Anybody who's in the panel, is any of you guys having any problems? Silence is golden. So, okay, I'm gonna keep going then. We can circle back if anything's needed. So let me pull across here. So I was looking for a way for us to get a little bit more familiar with NX. And so I wanted to give us just kind of a brief overview of NX a little bit more deeply. It's a build system. Once again, it uses NG for quite a lot of its capabilities, but it establishes this sort of mono repo structure. It's great at scaling out new projects that we plan to scale and grow. And at least for me, it handles many of the initial like configuration things that I need. So like if I think about Jest, which I like using instead of Karma, Cypress, which you know, it's great to just kind of add on to an existing project. I've used it on a lot of projects. And then it has a number of different add-ons that you can kind of quick install additional tooling very quickly. Not only this, but there's also optimizations to kind of the build system and how the builds are run. They offer like some cloud offerings that help kind of store that, so your entire team can kind of benefit from everybody else's builds, which is a really cool feature. And then it just establishes this lightweight mono repo structure, like I mentioned. So feel free if you want to follow along on this. I'm just going to kind of run through a quick example of an NX workspace. So let's see here. I had this open. There it is. So if we spin up a new NX workspace, just for comparison's sake, we've got the other library to compare against, so you can kind of see the difference between the two. We can see it here. The code that we ran to do this was npx create NX workspace. We used the preset for Angular that NX provides. We used a name for our workspace that was ng-conf, and then we had an app name. This is for the initial Angular app that is going to be inside of the code. And I just use conference app. I use app a lot of the time, but I think, yeah, actually, I think it'll actually set app as your kind of default name for all of your components. Let's check on that really quick. ng-conf. Interesting. I think that, yeah, that is one thing that you can configure. I think I may have gone back and changed that around a little bit, just so it was a little bit easier to think through. So now that we've done this, and we've got this new NX workspace created, we can actually add some additional dependencies. So for instance, we're going to be using Storybook in a bit. So we can install from Narwhal, Storybook. Let's go and grab us their Storybook kind of hookup. This guy. And I'll just stay up here for a minute. So yeah, we're just doing @narwhal Storybook. Pulling that guy down. Maybe we can get it all in one view. Ooh. Oh, yeah, okay. It's going to be installing some of these packages that I just installed. I thought it would have done that during the generate, but I guess we got lucky. Okay. Build all of our fresh packages here real quick. The one downside of Cypress is it does take quite a while for that to install, because it does have to kind of install it as this entire app for your OS. Okay, cool. So we've got that installed. Now we can use a generate command. Oh, no, we don't have it installed. I lied. So this is one thing NX does, is it does a pre-compilation of a lot of the core libraries. So that's actually what's happening here. When we do an install, it's actually going to compile this ahead of time. That way, when you do a yarn start, it's going to be lightning fast and really, really quick to be able to work with stuff. So it's only really slow when you're changing your dependencies. So we're going to do a generate out of the normal Angular schematics. And we're going to do set up an initial Storybook configuration for our conference app. Yeah, and we can also configure, this is kind of cool. So we can actually configure Cypress to also run against our Storybook instance, because Storybook will basically build us a lot of small pages that we can then test against. And yeah, let's go ahead and generate some stories for the existing files. And yeah, let's automatically just go forward with all that stuff. That's great. Okay. So it's going to run another install. That's going to take a little minute again, but we can at least take a look at kind of what this created. So you can see here, because we're using NX again, and it's thinking about like very monorepo first. We have any of our kind of core Storybook dependencies as like a top level dependency here. So if we want to change our configuration for any of the add-ons that are in any of the apps that are within our code, say we've got like multiple component libraries, or maybe our application and our component library are using separate Storybook instances, we can actually configure those two to run the same add-ons. So we can kind of benefit from having one configuration to run everything. And then we've got, of course, got our own tsconfig at the top level. Now at the individual level, we can actually configure some of the specifics for each application that we have. This preview code will run at the top level for Storybook. And then the other thing it generated was, of course, our story for things to run here. And so, like, I think this process of getting Storybook working with Angular isn't the most straightforward. It's something that finding out like the right way to do it, getting everything configured the right way. Like we've spent hours defining some of this stuff and trying to figure out what these things do. So it's really invaluable to have some tool that really gives us like a really good jump start into, hey, this is how you get things set up. This is how things start working. And then for us, we can now run NX run conf app Storybook. I think that got put inside of our Angular JSON. So here we are. So we've got our ng-run conf app Storybook, and it's going to be running Storybook on port 440. 4400. Okay. So now we'll get that started. Okay. And this is going to take over one of my browsers. So let's hope it's this one. Okay. Find any. Okay. So yeah, and then here we go. We've got Storybook running. We've got our kind of main page that exists inside of our application inside of Storybook. And now we're ready to go, and we can go add more components, add more features, add more capabilities. So that's just a brief kind of introduction to NX. We've already got this running inside of the Apollo Story client that we've already got set up. So no worries if you haven't followed along, but if you have, at least you've gotten a pretty good taste for what it's like to work with NX. Let's see if I had anything. Yeah, does anybody have any other questions about kind of using NX or kind of this process? Anything that like felt like it went by too fast and you were wondering? If you do have any questions, feel free to drop it in the Q&A. I'd be happy to answer it. If not, I will just, oh, still installing. Aha. Yeah, it can be really slow, especially because we installed everything and then we installed another thing. It can get going pretty slow here. Well, while it's installing, let me tell you a little bit about Storybook. And if we run into any problems, we can kind of bounce back a little bit. So building component stories. We have a Storybook instance running, but I think it might be helpful to look at something that's a little bit more full-fledged. So let's take a look at, yeah, this guy. Cool. So we've got Spotify Polaris, or Shopify Polaris. They have a public Storybook that is available for us to look at. And it's got a lot of different features that are just kind of really easy to look through here. Sorry for the URL. This is really rough. Let me copy paste that at least into the chat, in case you want to take a look at that. So what we have here is a series of different components. It's also really cool what they have. They have this like playground space set up, which I think would be a space where if you wanted to test out what components do, that'd be a space where you can do that. But when we look at one of these components, how Storybook lays things out is you have the component that's rendered inside of an iframe here. If you ever wanted to reference like just that iframe for a testing environment or something like that, you can actually pop out just that specific iframe as its own route, which is cool if you're doing like Cypress testing or any other testing framework. On top of this, we have a control console down at the bottom here. This gives us a detailed explanation of any input parameters that this component has. So we've got different names for the different parameters to this component, as well as a brief description, any defaults these components have, and then they don't have controls hooked up. We'll be hooking up controls, so we can take a more deep dive into that. You can also hook in like some basic accessibility testing using Axe, so that's really handy to be able to see stuff. And then knobs is actually very similar to controls. I don't know why they have both, but I think knobs is the old version of controls, and now controls is kind of essential to Storybook. Before it was just an additional add-on. So not only this canvas part exists, but you also have this docs space as well. Inside of here, we can see sort of the examples for all of the different stories that exist within the space. And then you can add additional kind of documentation about how these are used. It's all written in MDX, so it's markdown extended, which looks a lot like React. And I think it actually does use a React renderer to run. So if you do want to learn a little bit of React, this is a cool way to do it, be able to really show off the components that you're building and the different variations of your components. So that's kind of a brief walkthrough. There's a number of other features, and there's a lot of different add-ons that we can add to this. Stuff that I've looked into is like adding like Jira integration so that you can see like all of the work happening on a specific component, and there's a lot of other capabilities here. But one question that we get a lot, and when we're talking about using Storybook, is like, is this just documentation for components? And the answer is kind of, but it does a lot more. That's about like 10% of it. The real problem that Storybook tries to solve is us trying to understand components. And what we're really trying to understand is, do our components align between like the design and the implementation of those components? Do we, are we able to evaluate components individually on their quality? We're building these pages built out of these components, but sometimes you'll just have like a series of bugs that are all sort of related to the same thing. And so it helps to be able to just like directly evaluate just a single component at a time. Not only that, but having API guidelines and usage is really helpful. When you see a huge component that's made up of like 20 inputs and you don't know which inputs are like really valuable to be using, it can be really challenging to actually get any development work done. And then we also need this ability to kind of plan on expected behavior of these components, right? So we assume a component does something, and then we're expecting, hey, we're going to be building on that for our next feature or our next capability. And we need to understand, is that going to work? So those are the problems that we're trying to, or the questions we're trying to address. And today, if you're not using Storybook and you're not using something that does a similar task, really, this is how we find out. We have these kind of investigation tickets or developer investigations. We schedule big meetings across lots of different disciplines to try and get a full view of kind of what everything's happening. We do a lot of follow-up alignment discussions once we've kind of figured out what's going on, and we, judiciously document as much as we can, documentation that will change in the future, or will need to change in the future. And so it becomes a really challenging space for us to even align on like what the problem is, much less align on a solution. So if we're thinking about this and we're thinking about components, really, I wanted to help kind of illustrate this challenge. So this is off of JetBlue. It's their Booker component. When you're booking a new trip, this is probably, there are these kind of like quintessential most important components across a lot of different industries. If you're in a e-commerce industry, it's probably an image component. You want that to load fast. You want it to be snappy. You want it to be able to have like a heart or a bookmark over the top of it. You want it to lazy load in. If you're working in a more financial sector, you'll be working on like table components and trying to tabulate data and show that to the customer. And if you're in travel or you're hotel or accommodations, Booker components like this are really valuable. And what we're trying to evaluate with these high value components is does it work on mobile? What's the experience? How does it work? Is this going to be accessible for a screen reader? Are we going to be able to understand this for all of our customers and meet the full segment? Are we going to be able to handle the business cases that we believe exist today? And can we change those business cases to do something new without breaking? And can this also be configured the way we expect? Like, it's the input problem again. I see that there's an input that sounds like it does the thing I want, but does it actually do that? And sometimes, API names are one of the hardest problems. So, getting that right is really key, and being able to understand these inputs is really important. So that's why we're talking about leveraging Storybook. So interactive documentation, we can do explorations across all the variations of our components. We can do quick experimentation and discovery on top of these components because we're kind of building in this, isolated space. And not only is it good for testing and discovering things, but it's also a good test environment actually for, end-to-end testing and other things like that. So let's make a new story. We've got Storybook running inside of Apollo Story. And so let's get that going here. This is the right place. This is the core app going. I'm just going to open up a new window here, new terminal. And we're going to run X, run Apollo Story. And let's get that going. And we can see that again. We're just running this inside of the Angular JSON file. This is where that configuration is. And we're using this kind of narwhal builder to do that. So if you're wanting to, if you ever want to eject from the narwhal ecosystem and write your own Storybook integration, this is where you can change it on out. There's no need to be stuck in one place. So that's one thing that we're also trying to highlight with some of this is a lot of this is very agnostic to what environment you're in. So I'm not making a lot of assumptions on like what GraphQL backend you might be using, or what availability you have for new servers, or budgeting for using SaaS software, things like that. Those are hard things to push through, especially when you don't have a prototype. But we can at least get started with this and start seeing some stuff. So got this running. Let me close this guy. Get this Storybook example going here. Okay. Much messier graph going on here. I'm going to resize this, not to large mobile. Let's do tablet. Cool. So this is our rate component that we have in the application. And it's just that component kind of broken out as its own story. And our goal is to, once again, we're going to make a new story for the header component. So let's collapse everything, close some stuff down. there's a little bit more space to work with here. And let's go into Paula's story. I'm going to go into our source. I'm actually going to use the rates component story as an example that we can kind of build off of as we build our new header story component. So I'm going to keep the rates component open and the header component open. So for the header component, it's going to be app header. It's got some HTML. It's got on push strategy for change detection. And then we got our one input, which is title. When we look at the component, how the component's laid out, we've got our header here. Ooh, I'm gonna have to disable something. We've got our header here. We've got our before and after title, ng content, content projectors. There we go. And then we've got our title in here. And if you're not up to date on content projection, that's okay. Basically, I'm using this to give us a space where we can store things in before. So I've got our first kind of leading image there, and then I've got a following image behind it. So if we look at the running code example again, here's our title, here's the before and after image that we'll be building on. So, okay, so this is what we're going to be building a new story for. Got our rates story here as a reference. So I'm going to start a new file. Header component dot stories.ts. And I'm just going to make these side by side for now. I've got everything I need open, so give us a little bit more space here. Okay, so first off, we want to export a default configuration for this story example. So for this, yeah, we are doing a header. So I'm actually going to let Copilot autocomplete for me a little bit here. I'm going to be using a component that is the header component. It's right. Okay, so we're just going to be pulling that in as the component that we're building off of. And then we're kind of using Storybook as our module, to say the least. So I'm going to add some decorators. Oop, that's an array. And we're going to provide our module metadata for our Storybook example here. So we do need to declare the header component. That's one thing that we'll need to do. The component doesn't have any other imports. So here we see the rates component needs the reactive forms module because it's using a form. It's got that drop down that it's using. So we had to import that. But in our component, we don't actually have any other dependencies. And I can kind of show that if we look at the module. We're just using the common module. That's actually just kind of included already in our Storybook instance for its module, so we don't need to worry about it. Okay, and then we've got our archetypes. I'm just going to leave that empty for now. We're going to come back to that. Okay, next we're going to set up our template. This tells Storybook how we're going to render the component that we're going to be using. So we're going to define a constant template. Once again, Copilot saving me from typing a lot. I don't know if you're all familiar with it. I'll just show what it is. I'm using this like AI programming thing. So if you're wondering why code just ends up completing a lot of the time, that's why. I don't know. It's fun. So I'm going to provide my args. I'm going to provide a new template. We might need a little bit of space, so I'm going to break this down to 2 lines here. And then, yeah, we're going to be using this app header example here. Oh, don't need a semicolon. Okay, so we've got our app header defined. I know that we're going to need to put a title in here, so let's go ahead and say, I can actually just make this a string. Let's say hello, EnterpriseNG. title for this thing. Okay, so that gives us our template. These are the arguments that we could be passing into the component. We'll come back and define those archetypes later. And then we're going to look at the template args, and we can use this. Oh, whoops! I think I skipped a step. I did skip a step. Okay, so this gives us our core configuration. It gives us a template that we can use. This template's sort of like your kind of common template that you can use. So if we look at the rates component on the right, you can see that we have two different examples. So we have a rates example and a loading example. And these are just taking different kind of base arguments. And that gives us two different outputs in Storybook. So if we go back over and we look, that's sort of these two different stories that exist here. We've got a loading state where we're loading in the data for our graph. And then we've got another state here that is our full data that we've pulled in, and it's all mock data. But we'll explain how the mocking of that data works in just a bit in the preview. So now I'm just going to export, and let's do a, we're going to export title bar is going to be the name of our story. And we don't need to bind anything yet. Actually, one thing we could do is we could change this around, because we now know that we can pass in arguments. We can actually just pass this in. So if we have a title that we have in our arguments, this will actually use it as a template, and this argument will actually be able to be used similar to what we do if we had a local variable inside of our component. We'd actually just be able to kind of pass it through like this. So then when we're defining the arguments for our story, we can actually pass this in here. Yep, that's the wrong thing. Hello, EnterpriseNG. Cool. And is it arguments? No. Oh, simple thing. It doesn't know it has arguments unless you tell it that it's a story. So we need to type this. And we're going to be pulling that in from Storybook Angular. And this is a header component. Cool. Okay, so we've got that all written now. There's kind of three main parts. So we've got our configuration. This kind of defines the base module and how we're going to be rendering the component. This defines our template that we use for rendering the component that is our default. We can specify multiple templates too. If there's like, I don't know, a couple different examples that you want to run through, it's just helpful to have this that you can kind of reuse across different stories. So we've got that example here. And then I can go ahead and save this. It'll update our preview. And now when we go back, we've got our new header title bar example running in here. We've got a hello EnterpriseNG. And it actually hooked up our title for us, which is pretty nice, without actually having to do anything, because we have the component listed in our configuration. It'll actually automatically try and find some of these different input properties, and it uses type inference to basically give us this ability to kind of customize this on the fly. So let's say hi to Benjamin. Hello. So yeah, that's a little bit of a whirlwind, but how are people going through this? Is everyone following me on how this is going?
I'm going to chime in with some feedback since it's solicited, and everybody here has been kind of bumped up to a panelist. So if you want to unmute yourselves and give a little feedback, it's always welcome. It can be. It's good. It's going good, Ben. For me, the pacing is good. I'm able to follow what you're doing. There's some new stuff for me. Obviously, I haven't been exposed to Storybook before, but I'm able to follow along so far. So good. Anyone else out there? How are you guys doing? If you guys want to, maybe now's a good time to let that mic open up or add a comment in the chat. Just a little feedback for Ben so he doesn't feel like he's talking into a void. Okay, and I'm going to go with silence is golden there.
Sounds like
there we go. Alex is chiming in. Okay.
Oh no.
Okay. So Ace, if you're commenting, just quick, I don't want to step on you, but if you're commenting that you can't talk, at least you can't. It's probably because I haven't bumped you up to moderator. So please just comment and I'll go through that. But there's some comments there for you to address.
Cool. Awesome. Great. Glad it's a good speed and glad everything's going well. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Sometimes in excessive problems, and that is why I wanted to have something at least set up. Are you Alex, able to run the Apollo storybook example? Is that working out? And if not, I guess there is still the VS Code website example that we can be running through. So that's okay. All right, let's keep going a little bit. I want to enhance this. It's not quite the same as the deployed version we've got. We've got some logos and things over here, and we don't have any control over that. So it would be nice for us to get some of that stuff set up. Oh no, I bumped the input configuration. All right, let's see if it comes back. Maybe. Okay. Are you still seeing my codes on the screen? Okay, I think so. Okay, we'll go with a yes. If you can't see anything, let me know, and I'll follow back. So now we've got our cool. Okay, good. So we've got our code running here. Let's go ahead and specify a couple spans that we're going to use to be able to add in some before and after content. So we got our before content here. And if we look at the header component code, we can see that there is a projector name here that is our before title. So we're going to add that guy in there. And then we're going to also add our after title, say after. And let's just check that that worked. Okay, cool. So we've got our before, got our after. Everything's working from base configuration there. We still don't have our any ability to control these though, and that'd be nice to have. So let's go ahead here and add some stuff. So let's do an ng if, and these are going to be just some variables that we can use to configure some of this stuff. It's not going to be an input, but it will at least give us some way to configure this stuff. So I'm going to add a show before and show after value. And then for these, we can set a default for our configuration here, where we're going to set both of these to true. Oh man, AI is too powerful. Yeah, we might get some problems here because those aren't known on the component. And so how have I fixed that in the past? We can as any it for now. There's a way I've done a union type before, but let's get it working first, and then we can make it clean. So now we've got these two values, and if we run this here, let me just refresh to show that it worked. Yeah, we just got our kind of values here. Nothing else is really going on. So, and we don't have any control. Oh, we do have control. Oh man, Storybook. It's making it easy for me. Okay. Well, let's say those weren't showing up, and let's talk about how to configure our archetypes. If maybe the type is wrong, the type inference is incorrect, something we need to change something. We can set our show before to be a control value that is of type Boolean. And that'll give us a control type that is a Boolean type. We can do the same thing with our show after here as well. And so there's a number of different control configurations that Storybook takes for its different control types. There's a big list of them. I think I have it open. Oh, I don't. Storybook control types. Those. So for full list of the types, I think there's a big table at the bottom here. Yeah, here we go. So they actually provide a lot of different types. They actually have a color picker and a date picker, and a lot of different enums for you to choose from. You can specify kind of arrays of objects if there's like some defaults or things that you want the user to select from without having to remember and know exactly what to type in for your Storybook example. These are really handy to be able to use. So for us, we just have these as Booleans. They're just doing ngIfs to show things. And so, yeah, we're just able to add those as Booleans there. And now when we save this guy and we update it, we're not going to see any difference, but we are still able to show that these controls exist here. And we can have our before and after showing up there. One other thing that, oh, good, the code's still working. So one thing else that I've added onto this is story. And this is a add-on, and we can actually see where the add-on configuration is. So we, oh, wrong code. I'm actually just going to close the other code so that we don't get confused again. Okay. Sorry, jumping around a lot. Okay, so if I go into Storybook here and we look at our configuration, we actually have this story source add-on that I've added into the Apollo Storybook example. And what this does is it's just nice to be able to see, hey, if I wanted to configure this in my code somewhere, what does that code look like? How would that be configured for me? And so this is just a nice add-on that I think kind of completes the picture. You're able to see these different inputs and be able to understand kind of what they do. But it's nice to have something that tells you a little bit more information there. One other thing is these can, like, we need to be able to have some way of distinguishing this is an input, and then these are our kind of like special controls that are only for our Storybook example. Otherwise, somebody might try and do something with these. I guess we do have a before title and after title we could use. And that would give us at least some of the communication of like, hey, this is like what this is really for. So we could do that. That's one way to do it. Let's go ahead and update that. Grab that before title, after title. I think that won't mess anything up. Let's see. Yep, everything's fine. Before title and after title. But it'd be nice if we had like a description for these as well. And if we look at how these controls are configured, and we look for description. There's the description field. Let's see. Off the top of my head, how that's configured. Labels. Okay. Let's just take a quick look at this. I forget if there's another page in here as well. No. There we go. Okay, so we've got our archetype, and then it's just called description. There we go. All right. So now we might just add a description here that this is our content projector for content to show before the title. Something like that. Real values are elements. something to at least tell the user of this API, hey, this is actually what this is for. Some of these are fairly straightforward. Oh man, and Copilot just auto completing all my sentences. It could tell what I was going for. Okay. So that gives us our two archetypes. We've got our different descriptions on each one. If I save that, I go back into it. Now we've got our descriptions showing up here. And so any user who's like, hey, I wonder what is before title? I don't understand why, how is this a Boolean? It's called before. Then they can get a feel, okay, I got it. This is actually so that we can turn this off and on. And I think that's not working. Interesting. Oh, no, it is. It's not working inside of docs. Interesting. They did just update to Angular 13. I know that just got released. So I'm wondering if maybe we're on a weird version dependency conflict here. So anyway, it's only impacting docs, and at least we're able to keep going forward with this example. So that helps a little bit here. So now that we've got our example working, we can also take a look a little bit more into rates. One other thing that I would want to cover is actions. Actions are really nice if you have something that some component that is going to emit an action. In this case, we have this choice between different cryptocurrency tickers. And so if I switch to Bitcoin, here you can see the ticker changes. And we actually, this name is actually what we're going to be using as the output name. And then this is actually going to be the value of that. And if we go and look at the story example for this, the way this is set up, we've got our app rates component here. I'm just going to close some of these things so it's a little easier to see. We've got our app rates component here. We've got our rates data, our current ticker, and then we've got this event handler that we've hooked up for our emitted output. And then for our archetypes, what we just do is we have a name for that, which we can say, this is the action name that we're going to be emitting, and we're by having an action value, it's saying, hey, this when we're using this property, if it's called like a function, it's submitting an action. And so that's how we should treat it. So, oh, I don't know if I did this. This meta tag is nice because I think it gives you some of the autocomplete features as well. So I like adding that. That just kind of helps get everything working in a good way. Yeah, that kind of concludes some of the kind of Storybook aspects of everything. Does anybody have any questions with Storybook, getting it set up? Any kind of questions about stuff you've done prior with Storybook, if you've used it before? Okay. Ooh, how do I answer a question? I haven't used this before. Guess I can.
So I think just clicking below on the question is, and I'll read it out to you, did Storybook work well with reactive form? But I believe for the question how to read it, it's just there's a bar at the bottom, you can click on it, it should pop out.
Cool. Yeah. I said that okay, so I clicked, I will answer this question live. So then, okay, now I do my answer. Yeah. Yeah, it worked fairly well with reactive forms. Like you can see here, this is a very basic form that is set up. And so I've got the kind of reactive form all kind of contained within the component. It is more challenging if you have like this input uses a form control and exposes that. That's been a much more complicated problem to kind of like work through. And so the configuration for that is a lot more complex, but we were able to get it working on several different projects for being able to use that. So that's been, it is possible. That part's a little harder, I would say. You just have to kind of know your reactive forms module configuration pretty well. And then the next question, did Storybook bring its own UI library, or does it use whatever one uses for widgets and stuff? Yeah, so Storybook doesn't really bring its own UI library. I'm trying to think. I think the default configuration, if you're not using like NX or something, I think they do have like a default example that gives you just some kind of example code. But no, they don't provide any of their own kind of library of components, at least not that I know of. I know this kind of like layout and things that they kind of maintain and provide, but I haven't seen it actually exposed as like a bunch of components. I would be interested to see if Storybook has a Storybook for Storybook. That'd be pretty cool. Very much eat your own dog food type thing. So that would be a really cool thing, but I haven't seen that. If it does exist, I'll have to ask Varun and see if he knows about that. Well, cool. All right. So if you have any more questions on Storybook, it seems like we're getting through this at a pretty steady pace. So I'm sure we'll have some time at the end to go through a couple more questions. So I think we might just keep going along. I had a kind of a break scheduled, but maybe we can get through a little bit of GraphQL stuff first and then take a break and give a chance for everybody to kind of look at everything a bit more holistically then. So why don't I go ahead and do that? So for our next set of configuration, we're going to be talking about GraphQL and Apollo and discovering the right data. And when I talk about discovery, that's really what GraphQL does quite well. So to understand a little bit about GraphQL, go into some basics just in case you haven't heard of it or don't know about some of the details of it. GraphQL comes from this need to have a backend for front end. And what we see when we've spun up different code examples and different software solutions is we have these different applications that are using a assortment of different APIs. And for these API maintainers, managing all of these downstream dependencies becomes really challenging. When you want to try and update something, you have to really understand what are all of your consumers using, what's that API look like, and then you have to make sure that you really don't break them and offer migration strategies for them using their interface and the interface that you've exposed. And sometimes you've got like multiple different apps. Some of them are legacy, some of them might just be in maintenance mode, and it becomes really hard to actually change your APIs over time. And so also when you've got this setup, you've got apps that are making a lot of requests with a lot of latency to a lot of different APIs. And it'd be beneficial for you to actually put a little service out there that lives and can talk to these APIs really close to them. So that latency is reduced quite a bit. And then, if you've got a bunch of these APIs built and exposed, you're actually exposing quite a lot to the world. You've got, one app that can experience all these different APIs, and it's a lot of coverage for your security team to be able to think about and understand. So that's really why we think about BFFs and why really BFF has become a very traditional pattern for handling all of these problems. And sometimes we might set up a BFF or a backend for front end for each application that we're building out, and then those applications kind of own that BFF. In other solutions, there's kind of common BFFs that are just really used to handle things for the front end on behalf of the front end. And what a BFF looks like is it's really just kind of a pass-through. It's an interface, a gateway. It lets you access all these different API endpoints. You've got your gets, your puts, your posts, your other gets, and you get to use it the same way you would kind of a traditional REST API. You could specify whatever your protocol is here as well. GraphQL is one of those protocols, and this is really like becoming a traditional pattern in the last 10 years. It's something that has happened quite a bit as we have more needs to decouple and be able to make changes quickly. But this pattern is sort of limited, and it has some challenges, especially when we start thinking about mobile. Mobile users are really sensitive to large bandwidth usage, downloading a lot of data, having long load times when they have a slower connection or a spotty or intermittent connection. We have clients that are actually driving a lot of the changes in our businesses, right? We've got product teams that are focusing more and more on the client and requiring APIs to be built flexibly because we need to make these changes. We need to adjust over time, and you know, it's a lot of it is really driven by the client, and that expectation exists for APIs. The last kind of section is really like thinking about mobile product UX. When you have these intermittent connections, you need to be able to have these clients really restore their experiences, rely on advanced kind of caching techniques to you know, give the user a really good experience, no matter if they kind of lost a connection intermittently and are going under a tunnel or something, or they're on a train and they go through a kind of an outage zone. It'd be great if they could keep kind of adding items to their shopping cart or doing other actions. And then when you finally get a connection, being able to resume quickly against that interface. And it's hard when you've got to manage a lot of these different interactions separately. So how do we solve these problems with traditional BFS? One thing you can do is you can specify, well, I'm going to have this kind of separation between one application and another application. We're going to set up, you know, app one's endpoints over here, app two's endpoints over here, and then we can start optimizing for, you know, each application independently. Really, the challenge with this is like you're duplicating a lot of work. You are able to optimize for each application, but you know, over time, it becomes a lot to handle. It becomes a lot to manage. Why did this endpoint get built this way? Who remembers who was on that project? How does that work? It's just a lot of surface area to cover to be able to understand sort of, you know, each application, even if it is coupled with these teams. And then another way that you can start to think about handling this is, okay, well, yeah, when we, you know, make these requests to get this, you know, information and this data, we could specify a set of data points, right? Custom data points. And we say, hey, okay, we'll just request some of these data points at a time and just give us back a smaller request payload. That way we'll be able to, you know, have a smaller request payload for our users. We'll be able to, you know, only request what we need, only send what we need across the line. And, you know, it adds a little bit of complexity now because your API contract is now very unique in terms of like maybe what requests you make on the back end, what data you're sending through to the front end. If you have like derived data points, it gets even like harder where, oh, well, you didn't request some of the data points that we use to derive this value, but you did request, you know, the end value. So we have to make all those other requests still. So you get into like this, you know, really kind of tricky place. And that's really where GraphQL comes in to try and help. And it comes from this perspective of having a, you know, a support for a single endpoint to support these multiple clients, but you're really able to, you know, maintain this strong contract while being able to sort of decrease this like exact coupling between this one API and this one app or this one use case, right? And so it helps us really optimize quite a bit. The queries look a lot like this on the right. So you're going to have a query. Maybe I'm getting some data. You can pass sort of parameters to specify what kind, like you know, what you're querying for exactly. In this case, maybe I'm querying for just one ticker. I'm not querying for everything. And then you're able to specify, hey, of the data that we got back for this, I actually really only care about these fields for the page that I'm on, or the view that I'm on. And by doing that, you can really just like speed up your load time really dramatically and really optimize. So this, you know, seems like kind of a weird thing. You're sort of like, are we doing like SQL on the front end? Are we doing like, you know, there's a query, it's a new query language. This is weird. There's some tools that help us out and help us kind of be able to play with and understand and explore this data a little bit. So I'm going to show what GraphQL does for us. There's this Star Wars API available here. And what this gives us is a GraphQL API across all the different Star Wars films. And you can see we've requested all films. For each of those films, we're getting the title, the episode ID, the planet connection, which gives us all the edge nodes for what planets existed inside of that episode, and then the name of that planet. And so when we request that data from this endpoint, we can actually see, hey, our response payload came back, and it's only coming back with this one structure, right? If we wanted to add to this, we get some autocomplete. That's really handy. So we can do this. We can say, hey, what's the diameter of all of these planets, for example? And then we can see that here. Let me drop this in the chat just in case people want to play with this. Okay. So this is a tool that actually you can kind of build all of this except for the request with just a schema, which is pretty wild. The schemas look like, if I go to our data library, we can actually take a look at it, at our schema that we're going to be using. So schemas here. So schemas look like this. It's basically a type definition for the data that we expose. So you can see here's the kind of overall schema. We've got queries and mutations. Queries are us requesting data, mutations are us changing data. We have then type definitions for different mutations. We have type definitions for what kind of data comes back. And then we've got our queries. So this tells us, hey, what are the different resolvers that we need to be able to get some of this data, and how do we hook up different pieces of data? Yeah, so that kind of gives us that we can also specify inputs. So if we have like a really complicated input that goes into one of these mutations, we can actually specify that here as a specific input as well. But using just this schema is actually all we need to actually build something that can understand, what different values can I get at each level of the schema that exists. So it's a really powerful thing, because now it enables you to really be platform agnostic with the tooling that you use for GraphQL. For instance, I used for the example AWS AppSync to be able to set up a graph. And so here, this is pretty similar. The only thing that's really nice about this is I can actually get sort of autocomplete on a lot of these values. Ooh, CRO. And not autocomplete, but I can get kind of like auto code generation. So because we're just kind of looking through the schema, I can kind of expand and add values to this. And I don't have to worry about how well I'm writing it, if I'm writing it correctly, all those sorts of things. But this gives us our capability to make those queries. And if I close things down, we can get back to a really lean query here. And so, yeah, this gives us our explorability. You could think about, hey, we have accounts, and like we've got multiple different, business units that think about accounts that our customers have very differently. And, you may have somebody who's in like sales and marketing who needs to know information about a client and their accounts, or you might have somebody who's, deep in the email department, or the email system, who thinks about accounts and makes certain comparisons. They're both having to track that same data, but if you had some ability to have this explorability in your organization, then you could, be able to kind of reuse things that already exist. And that's sort of why Apollo comes into the picture. Apollo provides Apollo GraphQL, not the God. Apollo provides this really platform that helps you really build, manage. They're going to go through a whole bunch of words here, but build and understand your stack. You can build these sort of subgraphs based on microservices or monoliths, and be able to transition to this kind of graph understanding of your organization, and really kind of have a unified graph model for all the different groups that are inside of your organization. So that's part of where Apollo comes in. It also has like a really sweet client for us to use. So, oh, sorry, there's no URL. Interesting. Let me try again with the Star Wars API. GraphQL. Try that. Okay. So that gives us kind of an intro there. So now the kind of piece on top of this, we have this schema A schema can really help us define what kind of queries are possible. How do we query the data that we have exposed through our GraphQL endpoint? NX gives us this capability to automate tasks and capabilities. And so we can actually kind of combine these two and use them together to be able to give us mocks and auto-generated domain access objects for our Angular library that then we can use inside of our application to be able to query from these schemas. And so when we update our GraphQL schema later, it'll automatically regenerate the code fully typed. And we can see sort of like what breaks inside of the front end. And we can actually even set that up as an automated process for if somebody on the back end wants to make a change. Because this is all code gen and because this is all automated, you could set up a pipeline to be able to say, hey, if you guys are going to make this change, here's what's going to break. And that's really cool, really cool capability. So what we're going to show here is with our kind of automation processes that we're going to generate is we're going to have a download schema that will download a schema from whatever source we need. We could have this I have it on AWS, so I've used the AWS CLI to do that. I'll show you the code. You'll have to have keys and stuff to be able to get that to work, but I'll at least show you the code about how that works. And then there's a generate command, which we'll use code generation to be able to generate our Angular output. And then we've got a separate mock command that'll help us generate our mocks. So we can give this a whirl and see how this all this stuff works. So let's dive in here. Just stop. Stop Storybook. Yeah, that's okay. I'm gonna spin it back up actually, and then we're just gonna open another terminal. And I will try and remember the order of these. All right. So let's do some code exploration. Let's close everything down. We can start from a fresh slate. So let's dive into our data here. So we know we've got our API inside of this folder, but when we want to download that data, I've mentioned NX is what does that. So if I look inside of our Angular JSON folder file, and we look for generate or schema, we can actually find that we have a command to run Apollo story data and download our schema. This API ID is public, it's fine. But we're using this download schema command. I'm using the AWS CLI, using AppSync, using a command called get introspect schema, passing it my app ID. I want it in the SDL format, which is just the domain language format. And then I want to store it into this file here. And this actually tells us where that schema is going to be stored. If you had a bunch of different schemas too, right? Like, I don't know, say you've got a bunch of different subgraphs or a bunch of different things that you're wanting to generate against. Maybe you've got different endpoints that exist elsewhere. We can just kind of tack on more commands here and be able to download a whole bunch of different schemas, all with kind of a single command. Just got to make sure you got all the right privileges and access. But exposing the schemas isn't really a big concern either. So a lot of times, a lot of companies will keep it public. At least some of it depends. In any case, so we've got our schemas there. So if I run download schemas, that will go into my schemas folder here, which we've already looked at. This is our schema that we've got. Then the second command that we've got is this generate command. And for this, we're using GraphQL code gen and just some TypeScript file for us to be able to generate some code and some mocks. So for the code gen, this is a separate repo. So let me go into that. Not a separate repo, but a library. So this is actually a really great library that gives us that code gen capability. We can pass in different plugins and things, and then we can see, given this schema, we could pass in some operations that we're going to be running. So anything that our pages need from that schema, we can run and generate with our configurations, different plugins for TypeScript. And then output is your types for your data. And you can you can get other things besides just types. You can also get your actual like classes and things like that as well. So if we look at our file for this, it's inside of our Apollo story data, we've got this code gen YAML file. So here, this is where this data is. So I don't think that's where that lives, but that's okay. Old comments. Anyway, we've got our overwrite. We're going to be overwriting this every time we run. This is the schema location that we've downloaded things to. We can specify a couple of different ones of these if we have different configurations. And then we're going to be generating to this file. And we are going to pull in any of our operations that we want from GraphQL folder, which is here. These are the different operations that we're going to be supporting. And then we're going to be using TypeScript operations to get us our operations data, and then TypeScript Apollo Angular. And that's going to help us specify our client coupling for Apollo. So it helps us set that up. So just to look at operations here, well, what operations files are is they're just going to be queries that we're going to need. So if we want a query that we want to be able to run, we can list those here. So for us, we've got this rates page. This is where we've got our crypto ticker for us to be able to use. And we're specifying a query. It takes a granularity for how often do we want to, at what granularity do we want to get data from the API, as well as the ticker. What is the crypto ticker that we currency that we want to be able to get from the API, and then we're returning that into rates and tickers, these two different values in here. And so we've got our and then we've got the data that we actually want to get back as well. So this is specifying, this is the API that I'm using. This is the name that I want to use inside of my client. This is the API, this is the value that I'm using, and then this is the name I want to use inside of my client as well. So you can, this is actually just like a rename of the existing schema. So we're going to get back an object that has rates, price, and updated. And then if we look at the generated code, now that we've got these two pieces, you can actually see here, we've got our granularity enum. I left in this notes API just as examples for mutations and things. Hope that doesn't complicate things too much, but we've got our types for our queries. So we've got our get crypto tracker, get tickers. We've got our arguments for that API, which are here. And then we've got our different types. So we've got our rate type and some note types as well. And then here's actually some GraphQL documents. So we're using this is how you kind of specify GraphQL if you're specifying it directly in code. And then here is our get notes call class, and here is our get crypto ticker GraphQL class that we're going to be using. And this actually uses Apollo query to be able to use that. Sorry, I can just close all of these. Give us a little bit more room. Okay. And you can see that this is just an Angular class. You've got your provided in root. You got your name of your value here, and then this can just be exported and used directly in the code. So let's look at how that's used, and then we can go into how our mocks are set up. So inside of the rates folder, we've got our page that we're using. So this is where your Angular router is routing us to. So this is the rates page. And inside of our constructor, when we first get to this page, we're going to use some just kind of defaults to give us our initial configuration. And we are going to pull in the class that we were just looking at, this class here. And using that, we were able to do a fetch call for this value and this granularity. And then we're going to set that to our rates data observable. And then inside of our component, we're just passing that in and specifying, hey, here's the rates data that we're going to be getting back. And let's pass that down to this component for us to be able to work with and kind of understand. So I've separated that out as a separate layer, partly because it just makes it like easy to understand, sort of like, here's the interface for this page, and then there's actually the implementation of the page. But also because it's a lot easier to kind of work with things with Storybook. If we start trying to like use Storybook for this page, we have to really, override some of these values here. And it gets a little complicated. So it was just nice to have that kind of separation of concerns. And so now when we're inside of the rates component, this has our rates data getting kind of passed down from that top layer. And then we can set our kind of rates form and patch onto any values that we get when we get new changes here. And then I think that's kind of it. We're just passing that data down and in. There's not really a lot else there. The only other things are this rates data object that we get back. If we look at this, this is going to be a Apollo query result. And query results from Apollo give us a set of data, any errors that we got along the way getting to that data, any Apollo specific error codes, our network status code for kind of like where things are, a loading value. So this gives us our kind of like, yeah, we're loading or we're not loading. And then we have a partial, which I've actually never used. I'm not sure what that does. Anyway, this gives us that kind of full understanding of like, what's the status of this request. And so now using that instead of our code, we can say, hey, okay, is this data loading? If it isn't, let's show our graph and our form. If it is loading, let's show a loading thing. And if we got an error, we got an error. Let's show something else there too. So this gives us that kind of capability at the component layer for us to really build in our full kind of set of experiences for when really that entire page's data loads or doesn't load. We can actually get errors and return data at the same time. So if like part of your query succeeded, but part of it didn't, the full errors object will actually give you some details on like what part of the data request actually came back. So you've got this array of GraphQL error, and it can actually tell you some of the details about where did this come from and why. At least to its knowledge. So that is how the data comes in and how it's used. Only other thing that's just nice to know is I've also got a GraphQL module that I'm using to just kind of spin up the Apollo configuration. This is really all I needed to set up Apollo. So I've got my AWS AppSync client, which I'm using with the Apollo options. So I'm like AppSync inside of Apollo for GraphQL. And so that AppSync client gives us this kind of set of capabilities here. And so we can just kind of pass our API keys and our region and what URL our API exists at. So through all of that, we're able to render some things out. So that is how it's all hooked up. And I'm sure there's kind of a lot to like kind of run through and kind of think through on that. But we'll go through it once more when we actually do kind of an example of us making a change and kind of seeing it. So if you didn't get the first time, we'll go through it again as well. And thanks again, Michael, for posting that. That's how the kind of installation happens for getting a Apollo Angular set up. Okay, so now let's look at mocks. That's the next step here. So I'm going to close everything out. So we have our data being generated using the generate command. We've generated our resolvers, and then we also have another command to generate our mocks. And so we actually are just using TS node to run a script that is going to output basically everything it gets into our specific mock value here. Now, this is like very raw, very basic. There's a lot that we can improve on to be able to handle like multiple different queries and multiple different configurations. I think it's valuable to kind of show like the basic pieces and then let anybody be able to take that and run with it. So, this is kind of like, experiment, figure out what works for you, and then kind of enhance it as we go. So let's look at this mock file. Here we have basically several different files that we're going to be pulling in. So we've got our schema that we need to be able to understand what does a schema look like. We need our GraphQL query for rates because we're going to be mocking out rates. So we need to know what data are we going to be expecting to get. So we need that. I need 1 month just so that I can calculate some mock data. So this data here, by default, the code that we're using and the kind of magic that's happening in here, we use some basic GraphQL tools to make our executable schema, but then we actually have this cool function that we can use using GraphQL tools mock to actually make our mock schema. And so this is actually just using some existing libraries and things that can help us out here. And so really we're kind of just going with this kind of basic setup that they describe here. Not doing too much on top of it, just really getting things to work. I just pulled in some files and kind of showed some of that. Just, when you do want to start breaking this out and making this a bit more extensible to be able to handle, I don't know, where you're storing different things or where things are. This at least kind of gives you the kind of building blocks for that. So we've got our schema, and then we've got our operations, and we know we're going to be creating this mock schema. What we need are configurations so that this isn't just a bunch of random data. It needs to, when we mock this data, it needs to eventually go into our graph and actually sort of, fit within the graph's understanding of what data looks like. And so some of that is, specifying, hey, for this type, if you're going to generate some random data, let's try and make it look a certain way. So what we've got here is our mocks. So this is a type that exists, and then some values that exist within that type. So for us, we've got our rate. The time updated is one of the values that we get returned. And I actually just want that to be within the last month. So we're going to use casual, which is a really cool random number generator. Actually, random everything generator kind of generates a bunch of different random stuff. You can do random strings or random integers between a certain range, which is what I'm doing here. Random doubles, which is good for price. And then you can also specify here, I want to generate a new array between a certain set of numbers. And this helps us say, hey, we're going to return an array that's this size. And then when it looks at the type, it's going to be able to look at this data to specify each value within that array. And so I'm just saying, hey, let's just have an array of 100. I actually don't think I need to use this. I think I could probably just do 100 and this would work, but just in case we want to change it to be a little bit more random later. And then we've got our tickers, which we need to return as well. So we've got this query space where we can specify some of that stuff. I don't know if I need the resolvers. Can't remember which one. I think this is duplicated. So let's see. This is one of the last things I was working through. So we're going to use NX run to just test this out. So when we get our mock data at the end, just so we know what to expect, it's going to go into this mock file here. I'm just going to format this so we can actually see what's in it. We've got our rates that has this big list of rates, and then we've got our tickers that we're going to need from our API. And so, okay, so this is what our output we expect is. So I just removed this code here that I think doesn't do anything. So let's check that really quick. Let's use Apollo story data. And then we're going to use generate as the command. And the other thing is, if you don't like having to remember everything, this, I thought that this had, yeah, it does. Within each project, if you have the NX extension, it'll actually give you a lot of these commands that you can run. And so this will actually kind of tell you what these commands are. I like having everything run through like my command line, but I can definitely understand like being able to just kind of like run some of these really quickly, being able to know what the full set of different configurations are. for everything. So this is actually a really nice way to be able to kind of explore that Angular JSON file using NX. So yeah, we've got our generated code. Let's see if I was right. Moment of truth. Okay, that one's needed. So this is what it does by default. If it says, hey, there's a string and we don't have a mock for it, we're just going to put something in. It does hello world by default. So now I'm wondering if this does anything. It'd be interesting if I need both. I don't think I do, but let's see. Yeah, I don't need that one. Okay. Yeah, I was trying things around. There are nice things that you can do with resolvers, because this is like you're getting a specific value back versus you're defining a function that gives you a value. So if you did want to take like input from a function, this is a lot better. And maybe that's, yeah, I'm not sure what I did wrong here. They have really good documentation on kind of like what all the resolvers are and how these all things work. But I wanted to make this less complicated for what's going on, so that at least we know we're just really using mocks here. We're not doing anything fancy with specifying custom resolvers or things like that. So, and then, okay, so now we've got, okay, these are our kind of mock definitions. We know what these do now. These kind of specify for our schema. If I'm looking for a note or I'm going to, mock out something that's a rate, this is how that works. If I'm saying, hey, this thing is going to return a lot of things and I want to control how many things it's going to return, that's the way to do that. And then we've got, we take all of that, we put it into our mock schema generation. And then we basically, now that we've got our schema with our mocks, we just need to run a query against that schema. So we've got our schema, we use our query, we pass in the data that we want to use to generate that data. And then we take that result. And in my case, I'm actually sorting the times so that this graph isn't just a total mess of dates all over the place. So I just sort the times in order so that at least it's all of these values come in the right order. And then I return the result. And I'm just outputting the conf log. And then if we look at our Angular JSON again, we can see that that is being output this way. So that's a lot, I know. A lot of things, a lot of different moving parts, but that's how all of that kind of goes together. And the final piece is we're really using this mock data now inside of Storybook, which is really, really powerful. So now, if I know that there's a change happening to our API, I can actually be evaluating our, code against that potential change. So let's actually go ahead and do that. We're going to update our graph to support Canadian prices. So if we look at our schema that exists today, let's go back here. We can see that schema inside of Paul's story data, inside of our schema here. So we've got this price value. And if we do a Canadian price, I think and I actually updated this on the server. So this has not been updated locally on the client yet, but the server has a capability. So let's just double check what it's called to make sure I got it right. Yep, price CAD. Okay. So we've got this new Canadian price that we're going to be generating. Okay. So we update that in our schema. We now know, okay, for our rates data that we want to get, we actually want to generate this. So let's actually add price CAD to our list of data that we want to get back from the API in our operations folder. So this update is, we've faked it, but this is an update that we could have downloaded from the server. So now if we run our generate command, we will see some data populate. Cool. So I got my generated code out. You can see that the type has been updated with a new value here. We can see that that's been updated on the type as well. And I think it's also been updated here on the query information as well. So that automatically updated all of our data access values. And so now that we've got that updated, we can look at the mock data that we generated out as well. So I'm just going to save this so we can see this. Okay, so it's generating some stuff. It's generating a lot of negative values. And I know that the graph that we built doesn't really show negatives. So the default code type generation isn't really going to work for us. So let's actually take the price that we were doing previously. Let's add that in. And it is Canadian, so let's add a little bit to this, like 120, something like that. And now we've got our prices coming through. I could do something clever with potentially generating the value and and then using that and then actually like adjusting it correctly, but let's just generate some data for now, because we're gonna just update it to display one or the other. So now we've got our new Canadian price generated. We look at our mock data. Ooh. Cool, we got another value here. And so now we've generated our new data that we're getting back. If we go to Storybook and we update, ooh, Storybook crash. Doesn't look like it. Well, let's give it a restart. Sometimes some weird things happen because this is a JSON file, and I think it deletes the file while we're generating. And so that may have actually caused a bit of a crash. Okay. So Webpack finished. Let's do some things here. Okay, cool. Looks like it's back up. Oh, it's at 4040. Okay. Or 4400. I keep saying 4040. Okay, so now we've got our data back here. It's new generated data, so we've got new prices. So it looks a little bit different than it did last time, but we've still got our data coming in here. If we look at the data, we can actually do some data exploration in Storybook. So we can look into the rates and we can see, okay, cool. We've got these new CAD prices coming in here. So that's going. Now, our Storybook example isn't really using these prices. So what we can do is let's just make sure that the graph can use different prices. So go into our graph and we look into this code here. I'm just going to look for price. Ooh. There's only two places that we're using price to be able to draw the data for our graph. There's a lot of code in here, and fortunately, we can kind of just look in one little spot for now. We may need to update some things here to be able to kind of switch between the two if we want. But for now, you can see that type came through, and we've got our autocomplete there. We're finding the max and min rates to be able to specify the max and min for our table. And then we've got our value coming in here. And so this is just inside of the rates component, inside the draw data function, updating these two values to be able to use our new data. So that's where that is. And we've got our previous data up still. So here we got this. So we should expect this to look pretty different. Oh, didn't mean to copy a line. Save that. Yeah, there we go. That looks very different. Got almost a flat line here, and then things are really volatile in this market. So yeah, that's us, and we've got our new max and min value there. We set that as 120 instead of 100. So this is definitely expanded a little bit, and we've got all of our data up until the current time that we've got today. So that's all mocked out. Got the new mock data done here, so that's good. But this isn't exactly, great for us as the company that's adding this feature. Let's go ahead and add a new option for us to specify which type of currency that we want to use. And this is where we might get a little bit into some stuff. So right now, all of the data comes from this kind of top level up here. which are current values. And then we can change those values and go and request new data. And if we wanted to, we could do something at this level where we have, we're fetching just the single prices at a time. But let's, for the sake of things, let's not kind of change the entire fetching interface. Let's just say, cool, we're going to get both prices whenever we get data. And at the component layer, we'll have those both prices that exist here. And so as such, let's go ahead and say the current price is current price value is price. And then there's going to be price, and then there's going to be price CAD. There's going to be 2 values here. And inside of the component, let's see, we're going to need another function to update this price. So let's do an update price value here. It's not a number. It's going to either be price or price CAD. And this is maybe not the best way to do this, but we can do this for now. Cool. We've got our price updating there. Okay. Let's close all these other tabs and let's keep this open to the side here in case people are, oh, I gotta open something else first. Okay. Let me open this. I can zoom out of the way so I can see. Bring this over to the side. Okay. So now we need another selector for this. So we've got our rate here, got our label here. Ooh, selector onto this guy here. I'm just going to throw this into a div. Just to separate these two out a little bit. Let's just specify a new set of values for us to use here. Ooh. Okay. So, and let's do currency. And we'll do some new options here. Oh, we actually have our control name here. We actually might not need to do all this stuff. And let's see, what am I going to be doing here? I'm going to be doing a value of price. And I guess I want to have this be USD. And then I want another one that is price CAD. That is Canadian. I want this to be our current price. Oh yeah, and then I can just put this in the form control. I don't have to do it the way I'm doing it. Yeah, we might not need this change, but we'll do update price for now. Yeah, we might actually not need all that. So, okay. So we've got this form group that we're building. Let's just add price to this. We don't have to do all this. Currency. Okay. So, right. No, it's price and price CAD. Forgot about that. Okay. And then go back here, this guy, and we've got our currency. Cool. I think that's right. Okay, cool. Sweet. So we got our 2 values there. That's all going through nicely like that. Now we just need to pass that value down into our rates component to be used. So if we go into our, right, we're already here. Okay. We just need to use our form reference, which I forget what that is. Rate form. Okay. So this is going to be currency. And let's pass in this dot Wait for dot. Oh, wait. Yeah. So I don't know if that's how I'm gonna get that. Right. Yeah, I do want to go from the right form. I forget what the accessor is for that. Isn't it? I thought I was getting it this way. Oh, but I'm getting it through changes. And then I'm passing a value onto it. Oh yeah, no, you just get a value. Okay. Did I just miss that? Oh, and I don't need a this. Yeah. Right, and then there's no type. That's what's going on. Okay. So then let's go into our graph component here. I'm going to add in our new, so we got our data coming in. Then we're going to add a new input for our currency type. Yeah, we're going to set that equal to price. And now we can use this currency value instead of where we made those changes for price CAD. We can do this dot price. This is our currency. Something like that. Okay. And this may be undefined. Actually, I mean, we are specifying a default, so I guess we don't actually need it to be undefined at any time. Okay. And then we just need, yeah, whenever any of this data changes, we want that, but also if the changes is in the currency value. Yep, previous value. Then might as well redraw the data. Okay. So got our currency coming in. It's inside of that form. When we get a change to it, we're going to redraw the graph. When we redraw the graph, we're going to use the max and min from that currency type. And we're going to use the value using the currency type that we have as well. And I don't know what's going on here. Oh, I guess I have it saved. Okay. So now with all of that, let's see where we're at. Oh, no preview. Interesting. Okay. I think we might have something breaking. It is something going on here. Oh, sorry. Okay. I feel like that's going to be a problem. Just get through it. I just want to make sure it works and then we can clean it up. Okay. Aha, there we go. Just needed a refresh. Okay. Sometimes when things are all concurrently running, they have a bit of a problem. So you kind of have to jostle it a little bit just to get things working. So, okay, so now we got our ticker value that can be updated. We've got those actions firing there. We update our currency value. Ooh, nothing works. Okay. Debug time. Okay. Property undefined when reading current value. Oh, right. Probably also want to make sure currency has actually changed. This thing always runs so fast. I'm never never quite sure when it happened. Okay. NG changes. Hmm. Okay, we always have a value for currency. It may not exist on changes. As a changed value. I guess we could have the same thing happen with data, but I don't think that's what's happening. Okay, let's restart Bookback or restart Storybook and see maybe something's going on there. Hmm. Okay. There we go. That's what was expected. All right. Yeah, sometimes you also have to restart it. And I think that happens sometimes when something breaks, because it's all in kind of a set of iframes. Sometimes it has a hard time realizing, hey, we need to rerun and reassociate these these files. And so, yeah, Storybook sometimes is a little bit of a problem with that, but we got there in the end. So now we've got this brand new capability that we didn't have before for this component to work. And now I think also if we look at the update, because this is actually part of the actual GraphQL schema already, we can actually see that, yeah, we are in reality, it is the same values. If we just kind of scale it to the same time period, our graph isn't going to change, but our scale certainly will. And so we'll get different data, but really render the same graph. And so now we've built this new capability using this currency value. We built it out of mocks. And then when the API actually finally updates, now cool, like we can actually just swap it in. We had a testing environment here in Storybook where we can kind of evaluate it. And then when the API kind of finishes and comes along, we've got the full thing here. And this gives us a place where we can kind of test things out, even if APIs aren't quite ready yet. So I went through that. I tried to go through it a little slow. It's familiar code to me, so I may have gone a bit too quickly. Where's everybody at? Anybody kind of stuck on something? Anybody, anything really confusing?
That was a good time. Hey, Ben, thanks for so much for doing this so far. Good. I was curious at some point if you can touch on the topic of testing, how you're doing. If there's any issues, we'd have to take into consideration with and then testing for Storybook. If you can get to that, but also if anyone else would like to jump in on questions, seems like a great time. Right?
Yeah, totally. So if you do have a question, let's drop it in the Q&A. And then I can start in on the Storybook testing. And then we can kind of go from there. So there's a number of ways to do some pretty interesting testing with Storybook. One way that I like is you have what Storybook kind of gives you. So say I deployed this somewhere that isn't localhost, right? We can even just look at the example that we had up. with the Polaris site. I think that's actually in the chat. Let me just grab that, open that back up. Oh, it was actually up there quite a ways. Okay, so we've got this Polaris site that runs. One thing that this gets us is we can actually expose this API or this page that has our Storybook instance running in it. And then inside of here, there's a number of different kind of ways that we could do some testing in this. So for end-to-end testing, I really like Cypress. The thing I like about Cypress is it's really easy to kind of like run through and build a test end-to-end. And if you haven't used it before, let me see if I can find some code. Let's see. Yeah, so the code really looks a lot like this. You've got these like, I'm going to visit this page. I'm going to get this element on the page. You can type things in, and then you can kind of like evaluate that you got something like, so this should be visible or this thing should happen. And these run really quick through the page. And this is all happening in the browser. Sorry, was there something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that looks a lot quicker than the setups that we do for Karma Jasmine.
Right. Yeah. For Karma Jasmine, and like Karma Jasmine is like it's test bed, right?
Yeah.
And so you do have integration, but it's like it's integration inside of like an Angular like environment that's not really just like the browser. Whereas this is just the browser, right? You can write tests for any page. They tell you not to, like, don't write tests for pages you don't control. But yeah, if you're just, I mean, your load time is a refresh of this iframe, and cool, now you're running, and the framework's just on top of that. So if you're setting up like an automated space, that's a really cool thing. The other tool that we like to use is Percy. And Percy gives you this like visual review platform. So you basically have like, say, 2 versions of your site, and you can basically detect where did things change between 2 different versions. It'll basically take a snapshot of your DOM, load it up across a lot of different browsers, so you get that browser compatibility of what's being rendered, and then you get this kind of dashboard where your product owner or product manager can like approve or deny certain changes, right? So if you think about like that on top of Storybook, I've got this page that has my story, configuration, or I've got this page that has this like complicated graph. I've got my mock data. It's pretty much locked down. If we ever change it, that's fine. Like we can, rebuild. And we'll see that those changes happen in Percy, but we'll also check for, hey, did anything else unexpected change? Did we hit any weird race conditions or other things that we didn't expect, or weird changes? And when you have so many different components all going together into one page, it's easy for one component to impact something else. And this is a good way to catch that. So those are kind of 2 like SaaS level tools, I guess, that we've used. Another tool, if you're just looking for something local, is Story Shots, which is basically snapshot testing against the DOM of Storybook. So you basically have whatever DOM gets generated by your configuration that you have. What this will do is it'll run all of that DOM and kind of evaluate, hey, did something change between these 2 different like versions? And that gives you like something that you can run in the CI. You don't need any sort of like, external pricing and things like that. The thing it doesn't catch is like your visual regressions or your actual functionality. But it does at least catch like, hey, I made this, I have these configurations. Did I get the expected, structure out on the other side? So those are the 3. Sorry, a lot of cool testing capabilities.
And it looks like we got a comment from Michael that there's also chromatic.com.
Yeah, Chromatic is another one too. Yeah, thanks for that recommendation as well. I think this is, do you want to chime in and kind of describe this maybe for us?
Yeah, that's the official one that the Storybook team actually has released as a product. I have not used it for any project so far, so I can't really comment a whole lot. I just know that a couple of teams, I think, or a couple of our teams have played around with using it. Like I know Varun had played around with it when he was with Rangle. But I think that's another option, or so just like as a SaaS product, or so that you more or less just plug in. And that should be relatively straightforward to set up since it's by the Storybook team.
Yeah.
So I assume that it's a pretty nice developer experience, but like it's not free, or it depends on like the budgeting, etc.
Right. Yeah. You get like a certain number of snapshots each month. Some things like that. Yeah. And then plans aren't too bad if you're thinking about enterprise pricing. It's a lot of these tools are pretty affordable. I know Percy, like if you're comparing Percy to like Amplitude's eyes, Percy becomes they partnered with Browser Stacks, and now it's all bundled inside of there. They got purchased recently, but yeah, if you're looking at even like 1,000 screenshots or 1,000,000 screenshots a month, you're still looking at a pretty low price. That one's free, and then Cypress is free unless you want some additional functionality. Like they have like a running end-to-end tests in parallel is one thing that is sort of a paid thing, and then they have a dashboard and some Jira integrations and some other things inside of there as well as they have this new flake management thing that I think is really cool. Like if you ever have flaky tests, especially end-to-end tests, it's really good to like know how to manage those and have cool tools for that. So because I think it's really easy to have a test that just always fails and everyone ignores it.
Yeah, I had that problem in some projects with like visual diff testing or so. Like visual diff testing is great, but like if your demo server or something, or like whatever server takes the snapshots is, you have like a fleet of those and some are configured slightly differently, you're really running into problems.
Yeah, definitely. That's another nice thing about just testing in the browser versus having like a Selenium build or something that's like building up a huge thing, is you're able to just like say, hey, it's a web page, so hopefully everything's the same. One set of fewer problems for you to have to think about. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts? Anything on any of the stuff that we've talked about? Anything about GraphQL? Anyone wants to discuss or know more about? Oh, no, okay, I answered those. I guess one question I have, has anybody here like used GraphQL in production? I guess not. That's okay.
I think we only saw there we go. I think Michael did, and then a couple. There we go. Brandon's chiming in. Sometimes it takes people a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
There we go.
Yeah, that's really cool.
No, I have not had it. Brandon says, yeah, my team says I think it's GraphQL is a mistake there a lot.
Right. Do you Brandon, I guess kind of jumping in more on that, do you use subgraphs and like things that are kind of like more advanced configurations, or are you guys mostly just using a kind of a single instance that's kind of used in a one specific part of your organization?
I'll be honest, it's not done very well.
Okay. No, that's fair.
It's very similar to kind of how you have this demo project set up.
Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of like it's been set up, but it hasn't really been like iterated on or improved on.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah,
yeah. We have a lot of improvements, and that's the majority of what I deal with.
Oh wow, cool.
Yeah. So we use NX a lot, and Angular, Nest, GraphQL.
Cool. Oh, Nest.
Yeah, Nest.js.
Oh, interesting.
Are you using the Nest version of, or like the Nest GraphQL client then?
Yes, we are.
Oh, cool.
Cool. How are you liking that?
I like it. Like I kind of mentioned, I think there's a lot we can do to improve it, and it's just kind of set up pretty basic right now.
Yeah, I was I don't know if you have been like, there's also another conference that just happened this week that was the what was it, Apollo Summit, and they were kind of talking about like, there's an interesting panel on like how to structure your kind of GraphQL setups and how the different kind of teams had kind of fought challenges with those sorts of things. I found it kind of like really interesting, and I think they just posted some of their YouTube videos on that too, so might be worth a look to see if there's kind of some other things that maybe overlap there as well.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. I saw some information about the conference and just wasn't able to do it.
Yeah, no, it's hard to find time, but yeah, thanks for coming, and I hope that helps. Okay, and then Jeremy, you've also used it for personal projects, but had problems with like the Angular Apollo hookup. I see. Yeah, did this help like clarify anything for you? I guess you're not in the panelist list, but I'd love to know if this helped in any way, or if there's still something that you're like fighting with or anything like that as well. But let's push through a couple more things. I just want to make sure that we kind of have a good understanding of sort of how these pieces go together. And I know it's kind of, when you're talking to business leaders and folks that are making some of these decisions, sometimes it's hard to put all that together. I bumped my monitor again, so I think it's good. Okay. This like monitor connection that I have is like really sketchy. Okay. So this is sort of the goal, right? We want to tackle this challenge of building a better product faster, and kind of using these tools to be able to handle some of these things. And so the first thing is really we're using GraphQL to have the flexibility to handle the unknown. It's hard to set some of these things up right, but teams that are setting things up last year really couldn't have possibly known what today's teams needed. And GraphQL at least has that flexibility to be able to handle some of that discoverability, and able to unblock teams by having this API that's constructed at least in a way that we have that discoverability and the ability to only use what we need. And then teams are able to like improve the user experience and kind of quickly iterate without needing to be bogged down in trying to get the perfect endpoint, the perfect API for them to actually be able to use to be able to kind of ship and distribute. And then when we're experimenting and aligning and we're bringing our teams together around these solutions, we want to be able to quickly align around like high quality implementations with this cross-disciplinary team. We want these tools that enable us to think about these components from a lot of different perspectives and be able for everybody to be involved with understanding and working against those constraints and the capabilities that these components have. And we want to be able to plan for future data using like generated data. So we can use mocks, we can use other things to and some of our testing to be able to understand sort of what is going to change and how are we going to be able to respond to that change in the future. And then we want to be able to enhance this with a solution for everybody to be able to contribute to the documentation. So I think that's one place where Storybook is a really good place because you're writing MDX and you're writing some Markdown. it's a good place for developers to be able to contribute, but it's not necessarily the best solution for designers or other teams to be able to contribute to as well. So having something like zero height or other tools and capabilities on top of this, that gives you like a kind of platform for everybody to be able to contribute to. And so that's another thing to kind of look into as well if we're starting to look at implementing something like this. Then finally, we automate tasks to accelerate teams, right? So we're leveraging common tasks, and then we kind of keep improving as the teams need new capabilities, right? So we've got these common tasks that we need. We need to be able to pull these schemas in. We need to be able to generate these mocks that are based on the data that we are generating. And then we want to, speed up that kind of adoption of this API and the initial configuration with tooling, right? So NX helps us with that, helps us get some of that initial configuration set up right away. And then, as we sort of keep developing, we might realize, hey, we've got these additional libraries we want to spin up. And we can actually declutter the core application by having these spun up correctly as an Angular library in a separate repo or a separate part of the repo. And so that's really what the stack represents. It's, a set of tools, a set of capabilities, but with that end goal in mind, right? So, these challenges are going to keep coming at us. These are the tools that we think are the best for the job today. They could change in the future, but these are the sort of problems that we're trying to solve, and this is how we're solving them. So that's all I had. We got through it pretty fast, but I'd love to keep chatting, answering any questions anybody has, or if anybody has any things they want to build, we could also do some building. Happy to do some other stuff on top of links. And if not, that's okay. Thanks everybody for coming before anybody drops off. It was great being able to present to everybody, and I hope you got something really good out of this to be able to understand some of these cool capabilities.
Ben, before I get to thanking you, I just wanted to leave a note for everyone that came out here, is that this was being recorded, so I believe that you're going to be able to have access to it within the next 48 hours. I'm not really sure about the upload times on it, but then they're going to pull it off and polish up some of the audio and do a little bit of editing. And so a full version will be up and available within 3 weeks. So in case there was a command that anybody missed out on, or there's a part that you wanted to review, I know there's a lot of good information that came out of here. I got some I had some great takeaways, not just from Storybook, but just on tell you, just as my personal opinion, was this whole idea of a backend for front end was it's the first time I'm coming across that, and that was a great takeaway that I really appreciate from you. You're very knowledgeable on this subject, and I think I want to be, and everybody should be giving you a great big round of thanks and applause. If this were in person, we'd be doing this thing. So if everybody wants to kind of turn your cameras on for a second, or jump into the chat if you can, and leave a good word. I understand if you can't, sometimes life is going on with the Zoom, but there we go. Some applause all around. Really fantastic, really solid, interesting, very interesting product. And just as one last time, thanks for doing this. I really got a lot out of it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. I'm really glad. I hope everyone could kind of see all the pieces working. I tried to build something holistic, so I'm glad you got a lot out of it. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me.
Fantastic, guys. If you guys want to, I'm probably going to leave the chat open for another 10 minutes. I know sometimes people might want to come back, and if you want to drop them into any questions, any lingering questions, into the QA, that might be a place. I also know there's other places available. Do you have a Twitter handler, Ben? Is there a place where we can follow you on the social media?
Yeah, I don't have Twitter, believe it or not, but I do have I just have LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to connect and chat, I'm happy to do a coffee or anything like that. So I'm fairly easy to find. I think there's two Ben Hofferbers, but I'm the guy that looks like this. So if you just kind of search me online, there's benhofferber.com is my personal blog, but I'm also on LinkedIn, so you can find me there as well.
Well, fantastic. So just as one last time, many thanks for doing this. And like I said, I'm going to leave this, I'm going to leave the Zoom open for a little bit in case there's some lingering after party or kind of comments, but thanks for what you did today.
Sure. Awesome. I guess I can stop sharing.
I do kind of have one question.
Let's talk about it.
Okay, so we went through and we set up like the rates component stories TS file.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that required in order to set up Storybook for existing components?
So the rates component, it is not like the TS file for rates component.
Yeah, we did a couple different.
Yeah, sorry.
Like the component dot stories.
I see what you mean. Yeah. So the stories, this is required. So this is sort of like where the configuration happens for Storybook. The way it's structured is this is at sort of like the below page level. That's the only thing that was sort of unique about this. And I just did that so that I didn't have to worry about getting a complex module metadata set up. So like page is fairly sparse, but then the rates component inside of that page is the thing that has sort of more logic, but it's kind of ambiguous from Apollo. The only problem I had when I was setting this up was really getting this module metadata to mock the Apollo services. So that's why it was nice to kind of make that separation between the two. But sorry, I don't know if that answers your question. That's sort of about the structure. But
so I guess like the end goal, I'm thinking about this as far as how can I take Storybook and bring it into my project, and our existing project has hundreds of components. So am I going to have to write, create these, stories files for each component?
Right. Yeah. Okay. I see what you mean. Yeah. So I think the way that, I'm trying to remember if I pull it back open, I think the way that the generate function works from NX, it will try and configure those for you by default when the generator comes in. And I think it does an okay job. So like this app stories component, for example, this was just generated for me when we added the Storybook generated, like when we added it using the like NX generate. I can't remember where that was. Let me go back here quite a ways. Yeah, using this guy. So this, when we ran the generate here, this configuration got set up. It asked us a couple questions about like Cypress and integrating that. But on another question it did ask us, and I don't know if I can, maybe there's a way I can trigger it again. Let me try just discarding everything. And let's do, oh, I have it down here. Okay. So let's do NXG, Angular, Storybook configuration. Okay, so you might have Cypress, you might not. We'll do false for now. Automatically generate stories files for components declared in the project. So that's what we did. And I'm wondering how much that would cover for you. Because it might just get you like most of the way there. There might be a lot. So like, I don't know if it would be good to do like folder by folder or like feature by feature or something like that. Maybe that would be kind of easier, have this generate everything and then kind of like break it down into smaller stories. Because it is hard. Like one thing I've noticed with Storybook is there are times where like if you're exporting multiple things from a component file, like say you've got a component that also declares an enum, and those are in the same file, Storybook actually has a really hard time understanding that there's two things being exported. And so it'll actually like crash for that component. So it might be good to like break it down and say, okay, cool, we're going to tackle like this module first. We're going to generate all of these, you know, we'll have to do the full generation, but then, you know, we kind of like ignore everything except for this folder or something. And I don't know, maybe that's a good way to go about it.
Okay. Yeah, that I guess I just missed this,
Mm-hmm.
you know, little generate. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
I'm hoping at a minimum it can get through at least some of the boilerplate type stuff and
right.
You know, maybe just fine tune it later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know at least for if you have presentational and smarter components, I think for at least the presentational components, it'll give you most of it. I think for some of the smarter components, it's hard because I don't know how like diligent you are about your modules and like exactly pulling in only what you need, but that may also impact like how good it can generate some of the stuff.
Do you know, you may not know this, and that's fine. As far as generating these, will it handle component inheritance very well? I know it's kind of a model that, you know, you typically don't see in Angular.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I feel like it would, because I think it would just use the, like you've got this exported definition of a decorated component. And I would think that part of that declaration would be these, your other inherited values. So my gut says yes, but I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Good question.
Yeah. Awesome. I appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Great question.
Once again, I think I'm probably going to wrap down this the session, but it was absolutely great. So warm thanks. I hope everybody has a great conference. Those are able to participate in more workshops or more sessions. And here's looking forward to seeing you guys potentially in the future in person. I'm not sure if that's going to be something coming back. I certainly hope it is. Nonetheless, I still get a lot out of this. It's nice to have this human connection of us sharing ideas around something that we all work with every day, which is Angular and web development. So really, really great. Ben, I hope you're staying warm. You guys are up, if I'm not mistaken, you guys are up in Toronto. Is that where you're
That's
at?
right. That's right. Yeah, it's starting to turn. Yeah, so
I'm guessing I'm down in Northern Virginia and or outside of DC, and I'm guessing that we're probably about 6 weeks behind you as far as where the cold is coming in from.
Yeah, you probably got nice fall colors though.
Yeah, we do. We're going through the nice fall colors right now, so it's really we had a little bit of a nice summer week this week, but I think I can feel it. I'm glad I got all my wood cutting down in summer, ready to get that fireplace going.
Yeah, definitely. Got to be prepared.
And I'm also going to leave with thinking that none of what you were displaying for data is actual recommendations, one way or the other, to be involved with any of those cryptocurrencies.
It's real data, but yeah, no, it's all speculative.
That's very speculative for sure. And there's the good news is with all the crypto, there's a lot of craziness going on. People saying all those kind of things. Good news is there's a lot of APIs being built around the data. There's a lot of like interesting and very quick uses of data. I've seen a lot of very professional websites come up, just revolved around kind of like that community.
Yeah. I'm really interested in. There's another talk right on building a crypto app or something.
Yeah.
There's another workshop, so I'm interested in seeing that when that comes out.
It's the flavor. It might be the flavor of the year. I think. I don't know if Bitcoin pulls back. Maybe we go back to there seems to be different flavors that come up for what kind of apps we're building. But you're right. I love one of the points you made with this. Seems to this was for the travel, the date picker for the date picker for the travel. Seems to be everybody's industry gets like a certain kind of component which everybody gravitates to, and they have to do. It seems like at my workplace, it seems like we're just doing a million variations of search. How you search, and what's a search of searches, and a search of searches. And just, oh man, how far down that recursive path we can go. But I've definitely designed a lot of and worked with a lot of those kind of components. We're like, yeah, I've seen this one before. This comes up.
Yeah. It's that differentiation, right? Like you can't have just the component everybody else uses. You have something specific about your business, and it's like important that you build it right.
Yeah, but it can't at the same time. It can't be so far out of left field that nobody knows what it is.
Yes.
What is it? So you gotta leverage. You gotta be different, but not too different.
Yeah, exactly.
Very fun. Well, once again, my friend, I think I'm gonna close this down. Hey, Brandon, thanks for chatting and for the very insightful questions.
And thank you for the expert moderation. This is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Looking forward to talking to you again soon. I'll be hitting you up to be friends on LinkedIn and stay connected. But mostly, I hope to see everyone, Michael, Brandon, whoever's left here. I hope to see you guys for the next conference we get to when we do it live. On that one, I'm going to close it out. Thanks again.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.